Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and again, I just want to thank the Drakensberger Breeders Society for this invitation and to spend some time with you guys, really in an open-ended discussion, and I hope it becomes interactive and that everyone asks questions, because I think a lot of the questions have answers that are in the crowd and not necessarily stuff that I might be able to answer, and I always come away learning so much from these events. Because the crowd is packed with true animal scientists who measure genetics daily and they prove and disprove these genetics, and they do it in their own environment. And I'm always amazed at how many good ideas and findings come out from the crowd itself. You're told not to be biased in life when analyzing an event or an idea, but I have a strong bias. Within our industry, my bias leans into the farms that produce cows and calves. I think the abattoirs, the retailers, the feedlots do a tremendous job in taking care of themselves, and I'm glad they do, because it keeps our industry in the forefront. But for a very, very long time, the cow-calf guys have almost been a little bit of a charity, maybe, in farming for the feedlots or for the abattoirs or for the retailers. And I want to just encourage us as we start thinking about the cattle themselves and what it takes to make a profitable animal, that maybe it's not a bad idea to be profitable for ourselves as cow-calf producers, because it's not just important to the family itself that is farming that they are profitable. It's really important to all the communities that those farms surround. Those communities flourish because farms are profitable, and it decentralizes power out of the big cities. You get some wealth and some influence spread across the country. It makes for a very healthy country. And there is a phenotype and a genotype in the cattle industry that lends itself towards profitability. So that's where I'm going to zone in. Is in my bias is with the cow-calf guys. So my philosophy leans into something to where breed for your cow herd, or breed for your replacement females, and your steers or your bulls that go to the feedlot, they're a byproduct of that. That takes care of itself. But as long as you keep that factory functional, it'll take care of itself. I think that's a good start. Today we've got a 16-year-old cow, a 10-year-old cow in the ring and her bull calf next to her. She's got two other bull calves on the premises if you're interested in looking at them later. And I think this is a good place to start. One thing we've always assumed in the cattle industry is that 50% of a calf's influence comes from its mother and 50% from its father. And I'm just going to make a quick argument as to why I think that needs to be recalibrated, not just in our minds, but in data that gets released as well. So it is true that of the nuclear DNA that's passed on from the sire and the dam, it's 50-50, okay? So we get 50% from our father and 50% from our mother. But 100% of the mitochondrial DNA comes from the cow, okay? So that already gives her a big advantage over the bull that's been used to produce that calf. Also, the epigenetic activity that takes place in utero while that cow is gestating, that's all happening inside the environment of the uterus, of the womb. So that's another 100% attribution to the cow. And we found very interesting studies when working with embryos and putting them into recipients, how influential that environment within the womb is, not just for that calf's own performance for the rest of its life, but also in genes turning on and off through epigenetics, where it actually changes the DNA of that animal. The calf in the first couple of days receives colostrum. That all comes from the mother, and that calf thrives or fails for the rest of its life, flourishes or fails based on the colostrum and the quality of the colostrum that comes from that cow. And then the whole education process from birth until weaning, that mother teaches that calf how to be a cow, how to work within a herd. So there's no accurate science on this, but I'm estimating it's probably closer to 65% influence comes from the cow and 35 from the bull. So there's still a lot of value in the bull, but the value in the cow herd is significant. So therefore, it's not surprising to me that one 10-year-old cow's got 3 sons that have made it through a rigorous culling operation and procedure to all be on the premises here today. So I think maybe, are there any questions on that just before we move forward? Because that's going to lay a foundation for what we're going to discuss through the day. Are we all on the same track as that? I mean, I can poke the bear a little more and say, therefore, EBVs need to maybe be recalibrated, because at the moment, EBVs are calibrated 50% from the sire and 50% from the dam. Maybe the dam's influence needs to be a lot stronger in how we calibrate those EBVs. So if you've kept track of your cow families at home, you'll notice that certain cow families over generations are the ones that produce the good calves, regardless of what bull you put to them. The good cow families that do it. So that's that mitochondria really working its way through it. And I think has evidence to that as well. So another very important part as we get going through today, this 10-year-old cow, the fact that she is 10-year-old and she's still youthful in her appearance, she's still got a good body condition to her, she's still very productive, and her udder is still intact, and there's a lot of integrity in the way her udder's produced. Longevity is extremely underrated as a profit trait. And I know in the US, look, the US is a very different world, okay, in a lot of different ways. But, you know, most of the producers are calving at 2 years old, and it's because the environment is a lot easier. The nutritional levels are a lot higher in their grasses, and there's a lot more supplementation. So, but what they've calibrated is that a cow really only starts making money after she's 4 years old. Before then, she's just paying off her student loan, you know, from when she was on her mother and then just a passenger on the farm before she produced a calf. So in a system where you're calving at 3 years old, a cow needs to be at least 5 before she's paid off her student loan, which means if your cows aren't living, you know, up to 10 and more, your profitability is your margins are very tight because of how expensive it is to raise a replacement heifer. So I think we've got to reward these cattle that live a long time. And the way you do that is by selecting bulls to use in your herd as herd bulls that have come from cows and cow families that have got that longevity built into them. So how do you get longevity in a female? Well, there's several ways. The obvious way is how long a cow holds her teeth for. Okay, so that little bit of indicus blood that's in the Sangha cattle, that lets these cattle hold their teeth for that much longer. That's one of the huge benefits that comes from having a bit of indicus in the cattle. But on top of that, feet and legs. So you'll notice if you've been around enough cows that are calving, all calves are born with good feet. Okay, you'd never get a calf that's born with curling toes or a flat heel. They're all born with good feet. So the issue is obviously in the upper skeleton, and it's the pressure coming down from the shoulder or from the hip, through the hock, through the knee, onto the feet. If those angles aren't correct, if they're too straight, or if there's just too much angle, you're going to have feet that grow out and heels that get shallow, or if it's too steep and there's too much pressure, your toes start curling. A good foot with good toes that are evenly sized and evenly shaped, that goes a long way for longevity, because that's that foundation that keeps the animal going. And if an animal's got a really good foot, more often than not, she's got the right angle and softness in her joints, in her knee, at her pastern, from her shoulder, top of the shoulder down to the point of her shoulder. She'll have the right angle from hip to pin. That gives her some angle down to her hock and then down to her rear pasterns as well. So that's a huge part of longevity. The other thing I want to stress in longevity is the spine. We've been tempted across the world in beef cattle to have this dead level spine, and that's really good as long as they can keep that spine relaxed on the move, because the minute they start tightening up their spines and roaching up their spines, usually that's because either the shoulder or the hind leg or both are too straight. That discomfort is way too much pressure on the joints, and that'll affect longevity in a big way. Udders, like udder quality, is another huge factor in culling cows and getting them out of the system earlier than they need to be in their lives. Fortunately, cattle that are bred for reproduction first, where fertility is a highly regarded concept in terms of a profit trait, udder quality usually comes with that. You'll know within the breeds that are bred extensively and really sought after in these extensive, harsher environments, they usually have good udders. Okay. Now, as soon as you start getting cattle that are bred more for maximum weight and maximum growth and maximum milk or maximum muscle, the first thing that you'd notice is the udder integrity disappears, because it's a sex organ, right? So it's linked to hormonal balance. So if you're selecting for reproduction, you're going to have good udders, and good udders, like a udder that's tightly suspended with good teat size and placement and a good foreudder attachment, those udders last a long time within the herd. Another obvious thing that stops cows from getting old is them when they don't reproduce. So if you're a responsible manager and you're not keeping your cows that skipped, and you're forcing your cows to reproduce every year, reproduction becomes essential for longevity. So I know I've made this plea to a lot of you in attendance today several times, and I think this argument is becoming more and more mainstream than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. But if fertility is highly heritable, then we can phenotype for fertility. And what are the two traits in this cow? If I move her around, you'll notice that she's extremely easy fleshing, and we're going to get into that, like was requested. And she's feminine. Okay, so if a cow's feminine and easy fleshing, it means that she's phenotypically fertile. So if you think about that, the two things that will stop cows from breeding back every year in a commercial environment, number one is if your cows get a little too masculine, they start showing muscle expression and muscle tone, they start getting a little thicker in their necks and in their shoulders, they start losing that wedge shape like this cow's got. Okay, then they're losing their femininity or their hormonal balance. And easy fleshing ability or high inherent body condition or low maintenance, like this cow's got, is the other half of the equation for phenotyping fertility. Okay, so what does that mean? What does easy fleshing ability mean? It's low maintenance. So you go into a contemporary group of heifers or cows or bulls, and they've all been run the same way under the same environment. And this is best measured when the cattle are young, okay? Because that's going to encourage the early maturing genetics to come through. The fattest heifer in that group is the easy fleshing heifer, okay? The fattest heifer in that group is the low maintenance heifer. The fattest heifer in that group is the heifer that's got inherent body condition. So she's inherited that fattening ability from her sire dam genetically. She hasn't got that body condition from being fed out of a Furmel or out of a Molotech bag. And we really appreciate Furmel and Molotech for sponsoring this here today. And they're wonderful companies, but today's going to be about balance. So we're going to be balancing Furmel and Molotech with inherent body condition that gets inherited from the sire and dam. And I know those Furmel and Molotech guys are going to corner me afterwards, and they're going to tell me that fertility is not highly heritable. You need to feed it in. So we can have a good discussion about that later. What you'll notice here, and I think when Picky was picking these, I'm assuming he picked this bull and cow yesterday. The standout thing here that you'll notice is the sexual dimorphism. The female and the bull look nothing alike. I mean, that's his mother. She is extremely feminine. She's refined. She's moderate in her frame. She's ladylike. She's full-bodied and easy fleshing. She's got a face like a princess and a bum like a cook. That's what a well-balanced female looks like. The bull is the opposite. You know, look at this bull's head. He's got grunt and punch and thump, and he's masculine and rugged. He's got some coarse hair on his head and on his neck. He's got muscle shape and tone. You see, the cow doesn't have muscle shape and tone. She's just full-bodied, where he's got true muscle shape and tone to him. Those are the same genetics, but they express themselves differently in the sexes. So hormonal balance is highly heritable, and it expresses itself the opposite way, whether you're dealing with a male or a female in the species. And this is a mammalian phenomenon. Okay, all mammals, when selected naturally or selected for reproduction within a domestic system, hormonal balance takes place, and then sexual dimorphism takes place. You see, the bull and the cow are totally different sizes, totally different shapes, totally different look, but they've got the same trait, and that trait is hormonal balance. Now, what we find in a lot of our performance herds, so if you're breeding cattle for maximum weight, maximum growth, maximum muscle, maximum milk, think of all those breeds that maximize. It's safe to say, how many Holstein breeders are in the crowd? Okay, I'm safe. So if you go into a herd of Holstein cows, and if there was a Holstein bull with them, what do you notice? The bull and the cows look exactly the same, okay? The bull's a little feminine through his neck and head. The cows are very tall, almost the same height as that bull. They look like they're the same sex, okay? Because have Holsteins been bred for reproduction? No, they've been bred for maximum milk, okay? So when you breed for maximum milk, it's antagonistic to fertility. The average conception rate on first AI in the US on Holstein cows is around 18%, okay? And they're all scratching their heads and calling the feed companies as to what's going on. The problem was genetic. There's sexual monomorphism. There's no hormonal balance in those cattle. So it's essential for reproduction. But now a Holstein cow she's feminine, right? She's very feminine. She's extremely refined and feminine. So why is she not fertile? Because she's got no inherent body condition. She's too lean. She's too lean, and she's too late maturing. She hasn't got that easy fleshing ability. Are there any questions on easy fleshing ability? When I was in Namibia last year, after I spoke about easy fleshing ability, they said, that's very nice, but it's not for us. And I thought, goodness, if there's ever a place in the world that needs easy fleshing ability, it must be Namibia. So I thought I must have explained it wrong. So are we on the same page with that, or do I need to re-explain? Yes, yes, sir.
Just how do you distinguish an easy fleshed animal from a pattern animal?
Okay, so there are two ways. Okay, the foolproof way is that contemporary group of 100 heifers or 50 bulls or whatever. They're all the same age. They've all been running in the same conditions, and you bring them in as a group. The fattest heifer is easy fleshing. The leanest heifer is high maintenance or hard doing. Okay, so now think about that heifer. Her head's a little shorter, okay, than the lean heifer, because there's two extremes in that group. There's the leanest and the fattest. Her cannon bone's going to be a little shorter, so she's going to be earlier maturing, which encourages that easy fleshing ability. If you look over her rib cage, she's going to have a softness to her. Okay, so like this cow, she's got a softness over that rib cage. The way her eye is set, so you'll see this bull and that cow have got a very kind eye that's further down in their head and set inside their head with a strong eyebrow or eye bank. It's not a small high eye like a wild horse has got. Okay, so all those, and she's going to be long-bodied relative to her height, but she's not going to be tall. Okay, where the leaner, later maturing heifer is going to be quite a bit taller than the. Now this is the rule. There are always going to be exceptions, but that's the rule, and I'll explain what causes some of those exceptions. So does that paint a picture?
And what you said earlier, in younger animal, they're easy, but say if you go look at fat cows,
Yeah.
that someone's selling out.
Yeah.
That cow.
So with fat cows, but you probably need to pay a little bit more attention because you can get cattle that become easier fleshing after their long bones ossify and their sex hormones start. So they kick in later on in life. But that's obviously not what you're looking for in a breeding program, because our earlier maturing cattle that are easy fleshing at a young age, those are the animals that we're looking at. So for them, that's when you start looking at width and length of skull. You start looking at the length of the cannon bone. And even with those cattle, they might be fat, like they might have fat next to the anal fold over their pin bones. They might have fat in the brisket, but they never get soft over their rib cage. Like they have like a hardness and a harshness over their rib cage. And it's not, I've heard a lot of guys who do what we do, and they talk about this gifting that they have at looking at cattle. But I want to argue it's not a gifting. It's like golf. The more you go to the driving range and the more golf balls you hit, the more you see differences within cattle. It's just repetition. So I think the more cattle you see, the more repetition you get, the more you can identify when 5-year-old cows come in the ring that have all been fed, okay? Like 5 fat cows, you'll know the easy fleshing one and you'll know the hard doing later maturing one. And those are some indicators: length of skull, length of cannon bone, softness of the ribs, the shape of that lower rib cage. You see how both these cattle have got a lot of expression in their lower rib cage. It's not cylindrical. They've got a lot of rumen function in them. So both these cattle are easy fleshing cattle. You see both of them have got shorter heads, wide between the eyes, big muzzles, strong jaws, and I'm sure the Newman brothers, they haven't put them on display today, but somewhere in the veld they could show us some late maturing leaner cattle if we ask them to nicely, I'm sure. Maybe it works the same in sheep. We might catch a ewe later and show you a late maturing leaner ewe with that. Now, why is this important? Because the abattoirs or the packers, thank you, the abattoirs or the packers are going to want a leaner, later maturing animal because they can feed it for longer and they can get more muscle on it before they start tacking the fat on. And they're right. They are 100% right for making money for themselves. But remember, today's theme for me is making money for the cow-calf guys. And long-term, they also... This is fascinating, and this is an American statistic, and it is different to South Africa. But my argument is long-term, it's in their best interest, the feedlots and the abattoirs, for the cow-calf guys to become profitable. Otherwise, the cow-calf guys go out of business, and they have to become the cow-calf guys as well. And they don't want to. Those 4 big packers in the US, Tyson, JBS, National, and Cargill, none of them have cows or calves. So they know where the money is. It's further down the value chain. None of them have, but they're going to be forced to have cows or calves if they drive the cow-calf guys out of business. So let me put this into statistics for you. There's 100% available profit. Of the 100% available profit in the value chain in the US, okay? 1% goes to the retailer. Okay, so the equivalent of Woolworths or ShopRite, Checkers, so if they sell a steak for $16, they make 16 cents. Okay, so red meat for them is an anchor product. It's what gets people through the door, and they make money in toothpaste and toilet paper and stuff like that. Okay, the feedlots are sitting at about 3 to 4% profitability. Not this year's are extraordinary. I'm saying like the average over 10 years. The backgrounders are 3 to 4%. The calf guys are around 3 to 4%. The processors are at 87% of that available profit. Okay, so we mustn't worry about them. They're going to be fine. I think it's very important that we realize that being a charity is only fun for so long, and the second thing is that it's in their interest for the calf guys to make money, because otherwise there will be no cow-calf guys, and then they have to become them, and they don't want to. because they don't like 3 or 4% of that chunk. They want the 87% of that value chain. They only want to own them for 36 hours. They don't want to own them for their whole lives. So I think we've seen enough of these two. Unless you guys have got more questions on them, we can bring other cattle in. So what Picky asked is, what contribution does the bull have? Saying the cows, let's say, for example, it's 65% influence. So what is the bull's contribution? The two things we know from mitochondrial DNA that really affects cattle, the one is appetite, and the other one is adaptability, okay? So if you remember, I think it was I don't know which Bonsma book it was, and it's amazing. Like, he knew things but didn't have a name for it. Now we've got a name for what he already knew. When he was taught why he preferred crossing Hereford over Afrikaner cows as opposed to Afrikaner bulls over Hereford cows, because the product was different. And it's because the Afrikaner mitochondria made the calves more adapted to the bushveld, and the Afrikaner mitochondria gave those calves more appetite. Okay, so those come from the cow. What is the bull's contribution? It's huge. It's 35% total, but it's 50% of the nuclear DNA. So all the traits that we're talking about, 50% of that nuclear DNA is going to come from the bull. So we need our bulls to have, well, maybe this is a good segue into what I was going to say next. The bulls have to be able to eat, walk, and reproduce, okay? And then I'm going to go into a few more traits, and then you'll see how important it is to select the right bull. Because I'm not saying it's all the cow and forget about the bull. 35% is a lot. So with what do we mean by eat, walk, and reproduce? Okay, so we've got these 3 cows that have just come in. So eat, why is it so important? Because they're ruminants, so they need to take in as much forage as possible. They need a strong jaw and a wide muzzle, and that muzzle is the same width as the width between the pin bones. So the width of the muzzle is going to show us how much width there is all the way through the skeleton, okay? They need rumen function. These are ruminants, okay? So they're not monogastric, so we need these cattle to be full-bodied cattle with this incredible rumen function like this cow directly in front of me has got. So that's essential from the standpoint of eating, okay? Walking, we discussed in detail why feet and legs are so important. This also, the bull contributes 50% of this, the structure of the skeleton, the flexibility of the joints, the athleticism of these cattle. This all plays a huge part into their functional efficiency, their fertility, and their longevity within the breed. Within the herd, sorry. So with, let me pick a cow here, and let's just run through the skeleton quickly. So it's very important that we have angle. Everything I'm saying is going to be contributed by the bull. Okay, so then we're going to get into why that's so important. For me, shoulder angle is incredibly important in cattle. Okay, so the angle from the top of the shoulder, where the chine bone in Afrikaans, die cambien, from the top of the shoulder to the point of the shoulder, so that front of the scapula, we need like a 45-degree angle on that. There's several reasons for that. The first one is that angle allows the female or the bull to pick its head up. Otherwise, you'll notice very straight-shouldered cattle can't pick their heads up, okay, because it's geometry. The minute you've got a very straight-shouldered bull, he can only get his head up to the level of his spine. That's important for athleticism, because that angle from the top of the shoulder to the point of the shoulder, if you carry that angle down all the way to the ground, that's where that animal's foot's going to land for its next step. So if it's got a very straight shoulder, it's going to take short steps. If it's got good angle on its shoulder, its next step is, it's got good flexibility and good length from that stride. If you're running cattle on a large property in large pastures, and your cattle are going to live for a long time, length of stride becomes incredibly important. Okay. Also, the longer an animal strides, the more flexibility she's got, the more cushion she's got in her joints. So if you've got a bull that's straight up in his shoulder, straight up in his hind legs, and he's forward at his knee, so he hasn't got that shock absorber in his knee, he's going to be shuffling his big body around, and that's going to cut his life in half because his joints just aren't going to take all that pressure. Okay. Another really good reason for shoulder angle is calving ease. So if you consider how a calf presents itself through the birth canal, its front feet open and its head presented between those, between its front legs, an animal with no angle on its shoulder is going to struggle to present itself in that way because that requires great flexibility from the calf. One of the reasons why a lot of the European breeds, before they got improved, were really struggling with calving ease is because their shoulders were too straight. The calves just couldn't get enough angle to present themselves correctly, and they were getting caught in the shoulders. So that angle on the shoulder is also important because a correctly angled shoulder stays within the skeleton. The minute that shoulder gets too straight, it starts popping out of the skeleton, and that's what jams these calves up. So shoulder angle is essential. Now, when you've got an animal that's like a saddle horse that's got too much angle in its shoulder, it doesn't affect the flexibility of the animal at all. The skeleton actually stays relatively sound. The problem you get there is you lose heart girth and chest floor. So the more angle you get out of the top of the shoulders, it shrinks the chest floor of the animal, and just behind the shoulders and that forerib, it shrinks the heart girth. So like anything, we're going to try and find optimum in these cattle and balance where you want the right angle, not too much, and certainly not too little angle on that shoulder. The bull, you're going to inherit hormonal balance from the bull. So through that, we're going to get into fertility of all the traits when selecting livestock. Okay, not stocking rate, the livestock itself. Fertility is easily the most important trait. And like we just argued earlier, it's highly heritable. You can select for it. Selecting for fertility is finding those contemporaries in those young cattle. And guys, whether you're measuring scrotal circumference, body condition, try and do it as young as possible on those cattle, because the ones that are expressing that the youngest are the ones that are more desirable in your herd. You know, if you're measuring scrotal circumference for the first time on 3-year-old bulls, it's almost too late to tell the difference. You know, by that stage, like there's 2 or 3 centimeters difference between all those bulls. I would say the quickest you can get a measuring tape around those bull calves' testicles, do it as young as possible, because that's going to show you what bulls are fertile at a younger age, and that's going to express itself in the same way with the heifers coming into estrus at a younger age. So with that hormonal balance, the body condition that's going to come from that bull, this is a good example of easy fleshing and maybe a higher maintenance animal. So the bigger cow closest to you there, you can see she's not quite in the body condition of this cow over here. This cow's got a lot of back fat on her. She got some rump fat on her. She's soft on her hips. Where this cow is the leanest of the three. So do you see that difference in easy fleshing ability or body condition? And that's half the story. That body, we have to have fat on these cattle because we need that fat for them to reproduce. We need them for that fat for the heifers to come into estrus. We need it for outwintering these cattle, and from a grading system, when we grade these carcasses, you need fat on the carcass for a good eating experience. And that's why a female like this then becomes more desirable perhaps than the two on either side of her, just because of her inherent body condition. What bulls pass on with higher heritability is udder quality. And if possible, and it is possible, you just have to want to do it, try and see the bull's mother's udder before you use a bull, because it's so highly heritable how a bull reproduces his mother's udder in those daughters. And you'll see, like with these cows, look at the integrity. Is that a 15 or a 16? Or 16. 10-year-old cow, very tightly suspended udder, small teats, The teeth spacing is correct. There's 4 udder attachment. That udder's high and wide in the rear udder as well. So that udder quality, there's never ever been a good cow with a bad udder in the history of the world, and that is so essential for a good beef herd. Feet are highly heritable too. A bull with bad feet is going to breed bad feet, guys, and that's where structure again comes into it. Just make sure that before you run a bull through your herd, that his feet are right, that there's a good size foot. We don't want little feet, okay, because it's a foundation. So you need a good size foot that can carry the pressure of the entire body, and you need symmetry between those toes and some heel depth. I mean, one thing I noticed going through these cows this morning is whoever's doing the selection and whoever's doing the advice in this program is doing an incredible job on foot quality. He's really, really good feet in this herd, and I know, I mean, from what I've seen in the past within the breed too, the inspectors are doing a tremendous job with it. Is there any dispute between these two cows? It's not only the body condition, but also, can you see that cow gets a little straighter shouldered? She's a little higher in her chine. She's a little more masculine in her neck. She's got some neck muscle, which is not an estrogen trait. That's more of a testosterone trait. Where the slick-hided cow is longer bodied relative to her height. The taller cow is shorter bodied relative to her height. This is also a very good indication of hormonal balance. And I think if you look at the udders, she's also got a more tighter suspended udder with more appropriate teeth size and texture as well. So this is, I think Vicky sorted these cows very well. If you guys can have a good look at the differences between them. The other one's like intermediate in between them, but I think the two stark differences would be these two cows over here. I mean, I don't think it'll make a difference in terms of what we're saying, because an animal's shoulder doesn't get straighter with age. And that older cow, with a rising chine, guys, we need the chine to be lower than the shoulder blades. And that's a big maintenance issue too. So when your chine, think again, what breed has got a chine bone that's much higher than a shoulder blades? Holstein cow. How many fat Holstein cows have you seen in your life? Not many. And that high spine and that almost extreme top line and that high spine is something that's antagonistic to fertility, and you can see it in the body condition. The cows are the better body condition. Their shoulder blades are higher than their chine. I don't think that the 2 years would make a difference with what we're talking about now. Guys, have you noticed the length of these cattle's tails? What we found is maternal breeds or maternally orientated cattle around the world will always have a long tail with a switch that's almost on the ground with the females. And your terminal breeds, so breeds that have been bred for maximum muscle and growth, often tend to have those shorter tails, thicker tails. So something to bear in mind just from a correlation standpoint, that you're going to have a lot. Just be cautious if cattle come into the breed, they start getting shorter tails. I know a lot of our carriers of myostatin variants, you tend to get shorter tails with them as well, and that stands to reason. There's a lot of correlation there as well. Okay, so we said that the bull needs to produce cattle that can eat and walk. I think the rule of thumb has always been that the hind foot lands where the front foot was when an animal's moving. I don't know how necessary that really is. I think that's something that we came up with. We were looking for something to come up with. In nature, it's a lot more forgiving than that. As long as the cattle are comfortable and cushioned. So as long as there's softness in the joints and there's cushion in the joints and there's angle on the hock and angle on the knee, that's fine. With a moderate frame bull that's very long bodied, you're going to struggle to get a bull like that to put his hind foot where his front foot was. And if you think about any other ruminant wildlife species, they don't all put their hind foot where their front foot was. And then we went into longevity again, guys. These are, the Angus Association in the US has just started a new EPD, or same as an EBB. It's called functional longevity, okay? And they're basing it on cows 6 years old. Like 6 years old is when they're measuring functional longevity. A 6-year-old cow has got no age on her yet. I mean, she's almost prime time. She hasn't even hit prime time yet. So I think they had to do that because they lost their longevity. So I think we've got to keep the longevity in these cattle. So just an overview of that. What I would call profit traits would be, and we'll hit on adaptability with the next group that comes in, and I'll explain why that's so important. And functional efficiency, I'll break that down into what I actually mean by that. But you've got that fertility and longevity bred into these cattle. Those are profit traits, along with functional efficiency, and along with adaptability. That's environmental adaptability and nutritional adaptability. We'll get into that with the next pens. So those are profit traits. That's what keeps you in business, okay? Your muscle, milk, growth, marbling, weight, those are turnover traits. That's what you get paid for on the day. It's not what keeps you in business. So we've got to make sure that we select cattle with those aforementioned traits as a foundation, and then we find optimum with muscle, milk, growth, marbling, if necessary, within whatever market you're playing in. I think it's too common within our industry that people are breeding for muscle and for milk and for growth and for marbling, and they're ignoring that fundamental starting point of profit traits, which are adaptability, functional efficiency, fertility, and longevity. But we'll get into that now. Any more questions on these cows, or can we bring the next lot? Yes, sir. With adaptability, there are two things I want us to pay attention to. The one is environmental adaptability, so cattle that can adapt to the environment that they have to live and work in. And the second one is nutritional adaptability, so cattle that can adapt to whatever nutrition is available in that area. So what allows cattle to be adaptable? This all depends on the environment that they're in, okay? So let's take where we are today. We're in Rome. Ronnie, I thought we were at 1,600 meters. He tells me we're closer. So with adaptability, you've got to have cattle that can adapt to the environment. If we're near 2,000 meters here, there are several things that are essential. Number one is body type. At this altitude, you think about all the species around the world at altitude, none of them are heavy-boned or heavy-bodied. They all more this kind of frame and body type, okay? Think of humans, like the Nepalese at Everest, or the Peruvians. They're smaller frame people with a lot of lung capacity, okay? What's also essential here, and let's talk a little bit about color and why black works so well at this environment, or darker colors work so well at this environment, and why animals without pigment will struggle at this altitude. So black absorbs light extremely, extremely well, okay? And that's both infrared and ultraviolet. At this altitude, with so much ultraviolet, black cattle are going to absorb light and turn that into energy so much better, as will other dark-colored cattle. If you've got white-faced cattle that don't have pigment around the eyes or on the udders or on the other extremities, there's going to be extra stress on those cattle just from a light stress standpoint. The other thing that will help these cattle reflect infrared is their slick coat. So they're going to absorb the ultraviolet, and they're going to reflect that infrared. So that helps with the adaptability to this climate and environment that we're in now. From a nutritional adaptability standpoint, we're talking about low maintenance cattle that don't take a lot of input to produce some output. Okay, and I think both of these females that have come in here, you can see both of them are low maintenance cattle. They're moderate framed, they're full bodied, they're easy fleshing cattle with that inherent body condition, and they're cattle that have got some function to them. They're a lot deeper the amount of body compared to the amount of fresh air is significantly higher in both these cattle. That's good adaptability to, or nutritional adaptability, or low maintenance livestock. Okay. So the other trait we're going to talk about, and I'm going to use both these females, and I think they both fit that very, very well, is functional efficiency. And I'm going to use that interchangeably with balance, if you don't mind. I know it's not exactly the same thing, but I think for what we're going to try and do today, I'm going to call function efficient cattle balanced cattle, and I think there's something to be said. We could actually make those terms mean the same thing in the context of livestock. So the first thing is physiological balance. Guys, it's so important that all the body parts fit together appropriately and in the right proportions, okay? Secondly, it's a balance of the endocrine system, so endocrinological balance, where all the glands are functioning correctly, releasing hormones at the right level, and then that expresses itself in the animal's phenotype. Thirdly is a balance between muscle, the product we produce, and fat, the energy it takes to produce that product. So in females, we need a fat over muscle balance, okay? Because estrogen makes fat. In bulls, we need a muscle over fat balance because testosterone makes muscle, okay? We in both those traits, we need both. So we don't want overly muscular females, and we certainly don't want pretty, like bulls that are pretty in their appearance. We want them to be rugged in their appearance, okay? Bulls need some fleshing ability to them, but they need to be muscular first. Females need to be easy fleshing and have some fat to them first, with some muscle, but no muscle shape or tone. Okay, getting back to that sexual dimorphism. I think worldwide we've made a mistake in creating or appreciating females for being powerful. It's not the female's job to be powerful. It's the female's job to be full-bodied with that easy fleshing ability and more refined, like we discussed earlier. And then we discussed hormonal balance as the fourth criterion in terms of balance. This is so essential, and we used this terminology earlier. Bulls need to be rugged. They need to have muscle shape and tone. They need to have whatever adjective you want to use, grunt or thump or punch. You know what we're talking about when it comes to that. And then females are refined. They're smaller than the bull. They're lighter than the bull. They're fleshier than the bull, without any coarseness to them. They're slighter in their joints and slighter in their bone work. Okay. The fifth balance, and we can get into more of this detail later as well. We need to balance our data. Okay. And I'm not saying this just because he's in attendance, but the very best articulation of balanced data I've ever heard was, and I don't know where Picky said this, but Picky, he hit the nail on the head with this. The best way, I believe, to balance data is to select against negative outliers, not for positive outliers. That's how you said it, right? Yeah. So instead of selecting for low birth weight, you select against high birth weight. Instead of selecting for for high weaning weight, you select against low weaning weight. Same with milk. Don't select for high milk, select against low milk. Instead of muscle, instead of selecting for maximum muscle, you select against your low muscled cattle. Now, what you get at the end is an optimized animal, a phenotype and a genotype that's optimized, and that's actually a balanced animal. So remember, we're balancing the physiology, the endocrinology, we're balancing the muscle and fat, the hormones are balanced, and then we balance the data. That's an optimized animal, and optimized cattle are profitable. Anytime we maximize a trait, we compromise on fertility, and we certainly compromise on low maintenance traits. That was a lot. Are there any questions on that at all? So when you're reading your EBVs, and you're selecting a bull, instead of looking for trait leaders, all you do is you scratch out the ones that are too high on birth, too low on weaning, too low on 18 months, too high on mature cow weight, too low on milk, too low on muscle, and what's left you can use. I mean, everything that's left is optimized. You can use that. So we're looking for something in the middle, and it's a guardrail. It keeps you out of the ditches, you know. I do quite a lot of work with Farrow Cattle Company in the US, and I think the way Kit explained it, were any of you at Kit's talk in Pretoria, guys? I think he used this analogy there, I'm not sure, where he said that for him, hormonal balance was if 3 ladies are sitting on a couch, their hips are touching. If 3 men are sitting on a couch, their shoulders are touching. And just keep that in mind when you're analyzing bulls and females. And it's really a good depiction of just the difference in the shape of the sexes. Any other questions on? Oh, let's talk about that cow that wanted to eat me. So, guys, temperament is not a convenience trait. It's a profit trait, okay? And what I've found, South Africa, like South America and parts of Asia, is blessed with cheap labor. And often when there's cheap labor and the cheap labor is working the cows, the poorly temperamented cattle don't get culled because the owner's not in the kraal with them, okay? It's the same with bad udders. Like, there are a lot of bad udders that sneak through in countries with cheap labor. Temperament, I think and what I really appreciated going through the bulls earlier this morning is just how quiet, and they're not like, they haven't not got character. They're still pushing against each other and being bulls, but they're quiet and they're easy to work through and walk through. I think we've got to have a zero tolerance on bad temperament. Now, if you remember that cow correctly, where was her eye on her head? High up. And she had a weak little jaw. She had hardly any muzzle to her. And she was a leaner phenotype, okay? Yeah, long head, exactly. And there's longer skulled cattle with a small high eye and that weaker jaw that just tends to be, it correlates highly with bad temperament. The University of Oregon has done an interesting study where they're correlating good temperament and high fertility, which actually makes sense if you think about it. You know, your nervous cattle aren't going to conceive as easier as your quiet cattle. They're going to be leaner. They're not going to be that easy, soft, easy fleshing. So we can get so much out of her head. Like, she's the poorest headed animal that's come in here today, and she showed us a lot of those issues. She was narrow in her skeleton. She was wild. Now take these 2 cows, okay? Shorter headed, kinder eyed, bigger muzzle, stronger jaw, some width between the eyes, and that's going to show you tenderness in the carcass. It's going to show you fleshing ability, very, very short cannon bones, so she's going to be earlier maturing. There's fertility in that female. These 2 females are a very, very good example of a good skulled animal. I know that bar maybe a couple of South American countries, South African stockmen have always appreciated good heads, and it's essential because there's never, ever been a good bull with a bad head, ever, in the history of livestock production, which for me is it's essential. Like, don't compromise on that either. Just a comment here, you'll see with this cow, she's a little weaker in her spine, but I'm still okay with it. She's relaxed in her spine. You know, there's function to that. What I would want to change on her is just the root of her tail. The root of her tail's taken quite a lot of rump away with her, where most of the cattle that have come in here, almost all of them, are far more appropriate in their tail. And you see how the cow on the other side's tail hangs off the edge of her rump at 90 degrees, where this cow's tail is a little shorter and then creeps up the tail. So there's several issues there. The one is you're taking away from the rump. The second one is just from a hygiene and health level, like the angle of the anus to the vulva, like, is not ideal just for when a cow's cleansing after she's calved, and there's a bit of risk of infection there. So look, there are extremely good cattlemen who will tell you that what I'm doing here is actually a waste of time because I'm just adding more things to look at, okay? And that if you want to go a long way, you need to carry a small bag, you know, and I'm adding baggage to the bag. But guys, if you want to go a long way, your cattle better be structured correctly. Otherwise, they're not going to go anywhere. So I'm not saying we need to picket flies and try and find problems with any animal. Not that at all. I think that it's just vital that we understand how all these body parts work together. Where the people who say that we need to minimize criteria, I agree with them. I think that you need to look at the forest. Okay, when an animal comes in the ring, you either know it's going to work or it's not going to work for you long before you look at any individual points. What I'm doing today is just breaking down those points that become deal breakers and how you identify them, if that makes sense. So I'm not saying go to your herds and go and look at every tail head and, every toe, and I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that these are how all these different things correlate with one another. So let me put it this way. When you go to a bull sale and you're going to go select your bull, you do have a first impression, right? You've got a bull that jumps out at you, and that's the bull that you're going to hopefully take home that day. And it's not often that you turn your back on that first impression. And the reason why you're right is because of repetition. It's because you work with your cattle so much, you know what type of animal is going to work for you. Why I think it's important. I'm putting all the trees together to make a good forest here. And before you get that repetition, it's just good to have in your head what makes a good forest. Because if there's one tree that's diseased or infected, unfortunately, it affects the whole forest. When that wild cow came in here, you guys didn't like her long before she started being naughty. you didn't like her from the start because something was off with that cow. Her jaw was small, her eye was small. She was, she's a narrow frame type of female. She came in here and you could see she had that startled look about her. That was the forest. You guys rejected the forest before you even got into analyzing the cow herself. Hip to pin angle is just about as important as your shoulder angle. You guys as a breed have really worked hard on this in making sure that there is some angle from the hip bone to the pin bone to open that pelvic area. You've done a good job with your females of opening up your pin bones too. You need some width between those pins and some angle from hip to pin. What we are in danger of, and this is my fraternity, I judge a lot of cattle shows and I get a lot of flack for it. But what a lot of my fellow judges, well, our fraternity, let me take blame for it as well because I'm part of it. With bulls, we've started expecting bulls to be wide pinned and, have these big hips like cows do. Big hips is not a masculine trait. Big hips is a feminine trait. So that width that you expect over the hips in a cow is over the shoulders in a bull. It's not over the hips. True width in a bull needs to be in its thighs, not up in its hips. The widest part of a functionally efficient bull is, if this is a bull, is down here. Okay, can you guys see just in that lower rib cage, just above the flank? That's where a bull is widest, a functionally efficient bull. Now you'll take those terminal European bulls. So I like this thing. I'm going to get one of these. Those those European bulls, like your continental breeds, often the widest part is the thigh. You don't see the stomach, okay? That's actually not functionally efficient. Now with a female, what we often see with your popular high performance cattle is the widest part is the hips. But that's not a functionally efficient car. A functionally efficient car is widest here in this midrib up here. So when you get behind her, you want to see that midrib like this car. So about there, that's where she's widest. In this car, no. About there. Okay, can we let these two out? Early maturing, easy fleshing cattle. Number one, they come into estrus quicker. The females come into estrus quicker. Number two, the bulls are fertile at a younger age. Number three, with those cattle is there's fertility throughout their lives, longer because of hormonal balance and easy fleshing ability. Number 4 is they're non-selective grazers. Your cattle with appetite are your early maturing fat cattle, okay? Your leaner, later maturing bigger cattle are selective grazers. So if you want to graze well in big pastures with big groups of cattle, you need early maturing, easy fleshing cattle. They've got better temperaments. Your early maturing, easy fleshing cattle have got better temperaments. So like we spoke about, you know, the width between the eyes, the big kind eye that you find in cattle, the shorter head. Do you guys agree that that's a better temperamented animal, right? And it's the same with people. Like when you go to the bar, who's the friendliest one? The accountant with the glasses on the end of his nose with the eyes close together, or the big guy who's just having a good beer and like looks all jolly? It's the same all across species. We share a lot of DNA with these cattle. We're not very different to them. Okay, with these cattle, I want to. There's you know, Sangha cattle have got a touch of indicus in them that we found out through genome sequencing in the last two and a half decades. And there are a lot of positives that come from that. There's still people who like the Senepal, any Senepal breeders here. The Senepal guys try and hide that they've got any indicus in their breed. They tell a story about these Ndama cattle in the US Virgin Islands that were bred to red poles, and suddenly they had a heat-tolerant animal. But there's about 20% indicus in those cattle too. Genomics is like a truth serum. It's like a lie detector test. Once you get through all of that, you know what's in the cattle. Now, these indicus cattle do quite a few things really, really well. Number 1 is the body type of the animals. Like, okay, this is not an animal that body type that you would find like in England or Denmark or Canada, where polar bears live and moose live. These are cattle that are more for a more rugged, tougher environment, okay? Number 2, we spoke about color and the value of dark pigmented and black cattle at this altitude. Number 3 is the shiny hide, and especially in summer, that the reflection of infrared. And in winter, if you guys can grow hair, I'd encourage that you do it. This morning was it was biting, you know. So there's no harm in growing hair in the winter as long as they shed off when the days start getting longer here towards the end of the spring. The next thing is the amount of skin these cattle have got. You know, Indicus cattle have got more sweat glands per square inch than Bos Taurus cattle, and that little bit of extra sweat glands allows these cattle to sweat when it gets hot, because it gets hot here too. That extra skin it forms a radiator from the throat latch through the dewlap and to the brisket, and that radiator allows these cattle to sweat even more. So that becomes really, really essential. That there's a muscle, a subcutaneous muscle in the Indicus influence cattle that can shake an insect, external parasite off at the place where it's at, so they don't have to use their tails and their tongues to do it. And this obviously differs in how much Indicus is in the cattle. But there's a lot of positive, and that's why the Sangha could adapt so well here in sub-Saharan Africa, is because, you know, 1,200 to 1,500 years ago, when the Zebu cattle came in and mixed with the Bos Taurus, the African Bos Taurus, they came up with a really, really good recipe for adapted livestock. The other thing they do, you'll notice if you're working a herd of Sangha cattle or Indicus cattle versus a herd of British or European cattle, the amount of sebum they excrete is different. They smell different. The cattle have got a shiny substance to them, and that shiny substance is a sunblock. Okay, so it blocks the infrared and ultraviolet, but it's also an insect repellent. So that's why there are less flies on Sangha cattle than on British or European cattle, because they've got insect repellent built into them through that extra sebum that they excrete. Okay, so let's get into these females. extremely uniform. I don't know if there are any questions up front before we talk about these heifers, and I'll give a little rundown as to how I work replacement heifers with my clients, my consulting clients that I work with. Any questions, or can we? Yeah.
So if you would buy a bull or look at a bull, ULEP is something you would look at.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, that extra skin is so essential for sweating, and extra sweat glands, extra sweat, that's heat dissipation. And you'll find, I've got clients up in Illinois I was with last week, and it was end of May then, and they had Angus cows, and the Angus cows were already hiding in the ponds. And Illinois, further north, they're already heat stressed. And it's so easy to fix that. You just add some cattle that have got a little bit of extra skin so they can, instead of panting, they can sweat more efficiently. You know, cattle with extra dewlap sweat so much more efficiently than cattle without that extra dewlap. So one of the worst things a lot of the Indicus inference breeds have done is take a bit of throat and dewlap away, because then they lose that. That's actually a huge superpower that they've got is to be able to sweat. So guys, with a group of heifers, when we're selecting replacement females, I think it's so important that we simplify it as much as possible, and to the point where, you know, if you put that work in progress, you don't even have to be there. Eventually, you know, you can get your workers to do it, or your kids to do it, or whatever, because try and make that system as simple as possible. So the first thing is you get into that group of cattle, and then you go and you kick out anything that is all the skinny ones. Okay, anything that's got no body condition to it. That's the best decision you're going to make. Get rid of those skinny ones immediately. So then you're left with all your well-fleshed females, and then you kick out anything that doesn't look feminine. Okay, you kick out the masculine, over-muscled females from the start with that. And then you eliminate anything with temperament. Okay, anything that's left that's got temperament, you kick that out. I'm gonna come full circle on selection replacement heifers, but I took a guy up to Kenya. There's a boron herd called Olpejita, and I've been doing some work with him over the years. And I took a guy who was one of the guys who developed the 50K snip for Angus in the US, the genomic SNP. And we went through this herd of boron cattle, and there was a herd of maybe 100, 120 mature bulls in one area, and they were so impressive. You know, body type was the same, maturity pattern was the same, testicles, feet, legs were the same. There was muscle in them, just a really remarkable set of bulls. So then we, the manager at the time, who's still a consultant there, his name's Giles Prettyjohn, landed in his Piper Cub, and he was dressed like a Kenyan cowboy. He had his army hat on and a button-up shirt, but one or two buttons too many that were undone. And he had his rugby shorts on and a pair of strops. You know, I think they're illegal now. Are you allowed to wear strops? And he had a pair of strops on, and he came and this now the guy from Iowa, he was buttoned up, he was polished, and he's a animal scientist. So he was so impressed with those cattle, and he said to Giles, he said, what selection tools are you using? What genetic tools are you using to get your cattle to this uniformity and this level? And Giles just said to him, you know, every time these cattle come through the dip and we work them, anyone that doesn't look like the others, we kick out. Okay, that was, and that was that. And Mark Allen, good friend of mine, he said he thinks we might have overcomplicated the way we select these cattle. But I think that is the next step when you're selecting these heifers. The ones that are bigger or shorter or thicker or hairier or just different from the rest of them, you remove. So that nucleus becomes a uniform nucleus, because that's going to represent what your program is doing and what's worked well in your program. And I think there's massive, massive value in that. Okay, when we said earlier, selecting for hormonal balance in the cattle, or just taking the masculine ones out, the two places to look, especially in a mob of cattle like this, anything that's got a crest, like a bull would have. When you look back at the vulva, you're going to see a much smaller vulva with the ones that have got a crest. So that's a good cheat sheet to do it. The other thing that I would stress is, look, I'm standing way too close to these cattle to be able to see them. And it's like anything, any event or idea or situation in life, there are two ways that you don't see it. Number one is if you're too far away from it, and the other one is if you're too close to it. And I would say give yourself a good 20 to 30 meters. Cattle, you see cattle a lot better when you see the whole picture from a distance. Like when they're on top of you like this, you can pick the trees out, but it's hard to actually pick the forest out in terms of that. Once you've got that group they're easy fleshing, they're full-bodied, they're all feminine. You've kicked the wild ones out, they're all the same size. And let's say you need to cull another 5% of them. That's when you're just going structurally, as those females come past, straight shoulders, feet that are wrong, hind legs that are wrong. But that's right at the end of that process, because by the time you get to where you were, once you've got the skinny ones out and the masculine ones out and the wild ones out and the ones that are too big or too small or too different out, what you're left with there in that nucleus is going to work for you. But if you really need to get rid of another 5%, that's when you start sorting these things out on structure. Is there anything else on these young heifers, guys?
So you would like this one kroinkie is the crest.
The crest is just from the pole to the shoulder. Oh yes, okay. No, I'm getting that. There, that's the crest. Yeah. So you don't want that too pronounced, and you'll notice in those big, powerful females, they often get quite a big crest on them, and then they get smaller in their vulva as well. Like a female needs a flat neck, it's a feminine trait. Yeah, the disc golf, 100%.
So in this group, which heifer is your pick?
My brain works the other way around. So for me, you peel back from the bottom. So I'd peel her away first, and you see her hair standing up on the top of her head, so she hasn't got a nice flat pole. So her hormones aren't quite right yet, and she's showing that she's a little tighter in her gut. She's got some definition to her muscle, but she hasn't got that soft volume through the middle, and she's narrower in her skeleton. She's narrower through her chest and at her base. So that would be the one that would go first, would be this one. Can you guys see that body depth she's just a little shallower in her body, not quite the rumen function, just narrow over her top. Did you guys follow what we were saying with the hair when they stand up like that?
Yes. Ek het 'n vraag. Okay, by first day, so obviously you know wisdom use met Mariko. Wat sê nou maar jy is gedruk van ons. Hoe belangrik is die ontwikkeling, hoë ontwikkeling, en dan baie belangrik vir my die lang hare op die eie, en dan die belangrikheid van die kres, af die klos.
Oh well, yeah, the worlds. So so there, and then also here on the head, and then down in front of the shoulder. Okay. So, Becky, I agree. Your first thing you said I agree with as well. The easiest way to select heifers is by putting a bull to them. But that doesn't get you off the hook, because some people don't have enough space to keep all those heifers. Some people are starting a herd and need to go and select 30 heifers out of 100. So it's still a mechanism that I think we need to use. You know, I agree with you. The easiest way is to put a bull and let the bull decide on it. Okay? The hair whorls are fascinating. I've never gone to hair whorls first, but when you like a cow, remember that second group of cows is that really long-bodied, shiny cow. Her whorls were amazing, but I didn't like her because of her whorls. The cows you like are going to have good hair whorls. You know, if you're selecting for functional efficiency. Now the guys who go the other way around and go and find those, you know, good thymus whorls and good adrenal whorls and all that, they're going to find good cattle that way as well. So it's just, there's two different roads to get to your destination. So I've always used hair whorls as just an observation, said, oh, that's interesting afterwards. The guys who select on those hair whorls from the start, it really works. The vulva size will go with the crest. So your cattle with a pronounced crest are going to have small vulvas. It's essential. Like, you don't want to keep anything that's got small vulvas with it. Teat size and placement, for me, that comes into the structure of the thing. Usually, your feminine females that are full-bodied are going to have decent teats, okay? But that's going to come into the structural evaluation of those cattle for sure. And you want those teats to be nicely spaced and not too short. Like we also made a mistake in making teats too short, and the calf struggles to latch. You want them just a nice, pliable, practical size to them. Hair on udders is very interesting. A lot of it's environment. So when you've got a high altitude or a really cold environment, I've seen the most functional cows in the world up in North Dakota and Alberta. They've got hairy udders. And we came from here and we were told, no, cows need to have bald udders. And the whole herd there had hairy udders. So you've got to take into consideration your climate and your environment, but then within your contemporary groups, there are going to be some that are not that refined, silky hair that start becoming a rougher hair, and then you want to remove those. But I think on selecting heifers, by the time we get to those points, those cattle have been sorted out anyway. You know, the other criteria has sorted them out. You know. Okay, guys, chest floor. So between the front legs of an animal, you see the width between the legs. That chest floor is going to tell you how much genuine body skeletal width there is in the cattle. So the closer that chest is, the less rumen function and the rest, the less capacity they've got there. And you want this forerib is so essential. That heart girth is that's where the rumen function is. So when you've got what you call a devil's grip or a weak forerib or weak heart girth, those cattle are going to struggle to be efficient converters on grass because you've taken away that rumen function out of them, and they're going to be harder doing, and eventually it's going to affect fertility as well. So you want width at the base, like when you get behind them, you want them to have some base width when they move away from you, and then width through the chest, and that's going to give you your genuine skeletal width. And that's more often than not going to correlate with the width of the muzzle. So sometimes, you know, one look at an animal, like, you know, that she's going to have some width to her because she's got that wide muzzle already and that kind, soft eye, you know, where that wild cow, just by seeing her jaw and muzzle and where her eye was, you knew she was narrow, you know, just because it correlated all the way through. Bucky, was there something else? I think there was one other thing that you mentioned. Is that all of the...
Hier met perskwil. Perskwil maar op elkaar vooraf laat hy krinkie daar dat zo'n weg tegen meer die wel af.
Oh, this one. Yeah, but it's quite small. Yeah, very, very defined, but small. I think her issue, so do you guys see that thymus whorl over there? So the bigger that thymus whorl, the better. Okay. And yeah, I think what makes her so defined is she's got more hair. So there's more hair showing, but it's not very big. You know, where she's got a bigger thymus wall, this 43. And she's even bigger, this 59. Tail heads, we spoke about it with the cows, but it is important, like the way that tail head lays in, just from a functionality standpoint. You know, she's getting a little high in her tail head. That 24 is getting really, her tail head lays into the rump really, really well. So I think that's all extremely important. So earlier, when we were talking about selecting against negative outliers, I think there are two traits, and you can do this phenotypically or with data, that we need to select for, and they both relate to fertility. The number one is back fat or fat as I don't know how you describe it within your genetic evaluation, but those 18 to 24-month-old females, you're going to want to have positive fat numbers there, okay? And that goes in correlation to what you're saying about fat next to the anal fold and lumps of fat on a female. If they are in the same contemporary group, running in the same conditions at the same age, more fat is positive in females. Because remember, fat, that inherent body condition, is one half of the equation when it comes to selecting for fertility. Bulls is different. Testosterone burns that fat up. So when you see body condition on a bull, like this bull's in really good body condition, naturally, and he's got some good finish on him. But you see, he's got no fat next to the anal folds. He's trim through his brisket. So his testosterone is taking care of that surplus fat. Because estrogen makes fat, don't penalize females that have got some extra fat on them. They're going to reward you with that fat through fertility. And I think it's very important that we differentiate between the sexes when it comes to that. So remember, when you're looking at data and there's a fat number or back fat number or rump fat number on your young females, and when you measure them, if you scan them or visually appraise them, the fatter ones, you don't want to select against a negative outlier there. You're selecting for a positive outlier. And the other one is scrotal circumference. So because that's the other half of fertility, the hormonal balance that shows itself in the scrotal circumference. So you're going to want positive scrotal circumference in those young bulls, because the correlation is going to be more fertile sisters with more developed sexual organs and ovaries. You mentioned the scutcheon, melkspiel. I learned a new Afrikaans word today. 100%. So the cattle with good escutcheons, and this goes for all cattle that are selected for reproduction first, have got more butter fat than cattle that are selected for maximum milk. Okay, does that make sense? So your cattle that are selected for reproduction. Okay, does that make sense? So you take your cows that are 100% selected for fertility. No, these are the friendly ones. No, he is a friendly one. Okay, so with the discussion, you take a Holstein, you're hitting the Holsteins hard today. Now, I've got nothing against good Holsteins, but they've got a lot of milk, but very low butter fat percentage. Okay? And you'll notice their escutcheons aren't as pronounced as you see in a Drakensberger, Mashona, Nguni, Melkspiel. So behind the cow, from the vulva down to the top of the udder, you'll see it almost looks shiny. The hair is lying flat and in a different direction. Your more terminal cattle have got a very small melkspiel or escutcheon. Your maternal cattle get a bigger one, and the more pronounced it is, the more butter fat there is. So that's actually that's a really good way to get into the difference between maternal and terminal cattle. Your terminal cattle are going to show you a totally different body type, okay? Your terminal cattle are going to be more cylindrical through their middle, more pronounced in their muscle shape, and leaner and later maturing. So there are smaller testicles at a young age. Guys, it doesn't actually matter what size the testicles are when bulls are 4 and 5 years old. They're fertile at that age. What's important is to measure fertility through scrotal circumference at a young age, because that shows you which bull sisters are going to come into estrus at that young age. Those full-blood French cattle in France, they're about this tall, small little testicles. They're fertile, but they only get there when they're 4 or 5 years old. So scrotal circumference measured at a young age is so much more important in terms of the fertility starting at early maturity, and it creates that better body type. What you'll also see in your terminal females is they'll have a crest, almost like a bull, small little vulva, and they're going to have a very unpronounced discussion, like very, very small discussion on them. Why are terminal cattle less fertile? Is because they lack fat and hormonal balance. The females are rugged, they're powerful, they've got a lot of muscle, but the bulls do tend to have a smaller scrotum. When they're younger, they only develop that scrotum as they get older. There was a test done in Brazil where they tested 10,000 bulls, and they realized that at 27.5 centimeters is when the bulls stopped shooting blanks. Okay, so across breeds, Holstein, Nelore, Angus, all the breeds. But the age that they got to 27.5 centimeters could vary between 6 and 8 months between those different cattle. So the importance, now those bulls aren't going to breed a cow. They just, that's the day they become fertile. The important thing to realize is with the scrotal circumference, the earlier you can measure it, the more indication you're going to have of selecting for fertility in your herd. Even as young as 10, 11, 12 months, if you can get a scrotal measurement and start recording that. And then the bulls that have got those bigger scrotal circumferences at that age, maybe take note of them so that they can become your herd bulls as you move on. This is a very good example of a maternal bull, okay? Early maturing, masculine, massive in terms of his muscle, but he's soft-middled. You see, this bull's got no surplus fat on him, but he's still soft over the rib cage. He's not hard over his rib cage. This lower portion of his belly, so as you see that dewdrop shape to that lower rib shape that he's got, that is what shows us that he's maternal. He's got rumen function. He's a type of animal that will be efficient on grass. As you start getting more cylindrical or pipey in the cattle, they lose that rumen function. They become extremely efficient in terms of carcass yield, but they're completely inefficient on grass. Okay. Another thing we haven't touched on too much today is sheath. Guys, your breed's done a tremendous job in tidying the sheaths up, making sure that the angle on the sheath is right, the prepuce opening is correct, getting rid of anything that's got a prepusal prolapse to it. And you see that coarse hair around the prepuce, that just shows us testosterone, that definite curl in his switch. That's just testosterone causing that definite curl in his twist. You see the females that came in, they more look like they've been brushed out. They've got a flush of estrogen that goes through those twists. There was a question earlier regarding how important it is to take note of intercalving periods when you're selecting your bulls. This happened during the tea break, but I want to discuss that. When you're buying seed stock, when you're buying bulls to use in your commercial herd, or you're buying a registered bull to use in your stud herd, before you look at any data or numbers, I think you need to understand the program of the breeder that's producing that data and those numbers. Understand their production system, what nutrition is given to those cows, etc. And once you have an understanding and a trust of how that breeder operates, then yes, it's essential that we focus on reproduction and reproductive data from those females into calving periods, age at first calving, etc. Because selecting a bull from a cow that maybe went on holiday for a year or was late coming back into calf 1 year, all you're doing is you're risking bringing those slightly subfertile genetics into your herd. So put a lot of emphasis on those fertility records, but first trust the program that you're dealing with, because you can make an extremely fertile cow herd by throwing a lot of feed at it. So you need to understand how those numbers were built and how the sausage was made, because when you peel it back and you realize how the sausage was made, often it's not all sausage. There's a lot of fillers and stuff that goes into it as well. Did that cover that question, or was there something more to it?
Here's a follow-on. So, I mean, if you have a cow that went on holiday, like you said, and that bull calf usually is much stronger in the group because then just more reserved from a mother. So if you publicly on visual inspection, is there any way of seeing that there's some substability from that bull become quite impressive?
I think, look, he's definitely going to be very, very impressive up until a year old, because his mother, like you said, there were extra reserves from her taking a year off. But by the time they get to sale age, I think all things even, that would have evened out for sure. But don't neglect reproductive records, guys. I mean, like we said earlier, fertility is right up there as number one. In terms of cow size, and now I'm talking about maternal cattle and adapted cattle, I still get asked this question often, is what is the appropriate size for a cow? Now, there's a few data points that I run through, or a few points to consider, and you'll get to the right cow size. Okay, so the first thing I would say is, again, it comes down to nutrition. Don't spoil them and don't starve them. Okay, make sure that those females are responsibly managed. So the same as the major commercial guys in your area. The second thing is make sure that cow calves by the time she's 3 years old in this environment. The third thing is she needs to do that every single year. Okay. The fourth thing is she needs to do that within a set breeding period. What's a good mating timeline? What do you guys generally use in this area? For how long do you put the bull to the cows for? 3 months. Okay, so make sure that, because I've got some clients who get close to 100% conception, but it's over 8 or 9 months. So make sure it's within those 3 months. Then the next 2 points are, number one, it's not number one, this is number 4 now, is make sure that you establish a minimum weaning weight that's acceptable for your objectives and your market. Okay, so even if you're not breeding for growth, there is a minimum that's acceptable. So like in some areas it's 180 kilos, in some areas it's 220. It depends on your environment and your code and your climate. What that does is it stops your cows from getting too small. Okay, because an extremely small cow is not going to give you your minimum weight. And we're going for optimum, not for minimum or maximum, because our market requires an optimum. If we go too small, then we're competing with these merino ewes. And a sheep will always beat a cow, because they can raise twins and they can lamb more often. So we don't want to play in that lane. We want to stay in our own lane and make sure that we're producing enough product that's acceptable to the market, because we've got to sell these things at the end of the day. The next step would be to have a minimum or an optimum, let's call it an optimum weaning weight percentage, cow-calf percentage of between 45 and 55%. Okay, so on the bottom side, near 45% at around 7 months, because that's industry standard. On the top side of it, you get to about 55. When you start getting too much higher than that, the cows are putting way too many calories into raising their calf, and then they can struggle when it comes to reproduction or to fighting disease etc. So get in that sweet spot. That stops your cows from getting too big. And like clockwork, if you hit all those 6 objectives every year, your cows become very similar to the same size, and that's the right size for your farm. So if you've got a neighbor who argues with you that his 800 kg cows are what the market needs, and that they make financial sense or sense in terms of profitability, where you're gonna get him immediately. He's probably going to fall out in quite a few of those points, but he's just not going to win 45% body weight off an 800 kg cow. And you guys, they exist, and they're not so far from you either. You just start driving west for a while, and you'll see some 800 kg cows. So does that make sense? Are there any points within those that didn't make sense, or was any of that a little bit confusing in terms of what size a cow should be? What was the other thing, Berkie?
Ek het daar net vra. Ek weet beter ek het die vraag plaas van antwoord.
Ja. Wat die balle betref, die langhaar, ek weet net gesê die langhare op die skede is voorwaar is vir my wens en ster. Langhare op die skroot.
Okay, so like an udder, you want the scrotum to be bald, okay? And winter will change that in some places, though, depending on how harsh the winter is. And a lot of hair growth is not to do with heat or cold. It's length of day. So the places in the world that have very short days in winter, the cattle do get hair, everywhere. In breeding season or closer to breeding season, when the days start getting longer and that pituitary gland gets hit by the light, that's when the udders need to start losing their hair. The testicles need to almost be bald, like shiny. Guys with testicles, you want testicles that are very well suspended. You don't want those testicles suspended lower than the hocks. Yeah, you need a very short scrotal neck. The minute that neck gets too long, the animals are unadapted because they need to lengthen that neck for thermal regulation. So when you lengthen that neck, it means that the testicles aren't thermoregulated enough, so that's either the animal's not environmentally adapted or it's been fed too much for a sale or a show. The scrotal neck's got fat, so the scrotums drop because of that. It's very, very important that those testicles are even sized and shaped. You need some symmetry between them. I've got a theory on this that I don't want to die on that hill on, but I want to maybe throw it out and see what you guys think about it in terms of symmetrical scrotum and testicles, and an appropriate size. Too big is not good because too big can get injured. There is an optimum. The more size you've got in the scrotum and those testicles, the more semen it can produce. So it certainly is a positive thing in terms of fertility. I have heard a lot of vets, and I'm learning here as we go, it's just an observation thing, that say like a twisted scrotum or a skew scrotum is not a problem, it doesn't affect fertility, etc. But what I have noticed is in a lot of the adapted cattle breeds that are bred for reproduction first, indigenous to the areas that they come from, you very seldom see a scrotum that's not symmetrical. So I think even if it is good, fine for fertility for that bull for his lifetime, it is an abnormality. So it's almost like a skew mouth. I mean, a skew mouth, the animal's still going to eat. But I think there's a problem when you start introducing skew mouths into your herd, because it's a skeletal abnormality. So that's just, I don't know what the answer is, but you guys might have something to say about scrotum that's not symmetrical. I don't know. Do you guys have a view on that, or what's been your experience? What do you? Oh, really? Okay, good. Yeah. So, guys, to wrap it up, just an overview, just so we all stay on track, and then we're going to listen to a real scientist talk. I'm what you guys call a boss bull. I'm not a registered bull. I'm a commercial bull. We're going to listen to a registered bull talk next. Okay, so cattle need to eat, walk, and reproduce. Okay? We select cattle first for adaptability, functional efficiency, fertility, and longevity. Those are the profit traits. Then we optimize muscle, milk, growth, and marbling. Okay, so you don't maximize any of those, you optimize them. I do believe that quality cattle come in all different shapes, sizes, and colors. Okay, so it's very easy to make black ones and white ones and red ones and big ones and little ones and horned ones and polled ones. The art of breeding lies in making good cattle. Okay, and what is a good animal? It is one that fits your objectives, your resources, and your environment. As long as you've checked all those aforementioned words in that list. Our job as breeders is to take a complex situation, to simplify it, and then make it compelling. Okay, I think one of the biggest mistakes we've made in the cattle industry, and we're all involved in it, is we've taken a complex situation, we've complicated it, and then we've made it confusing. So I want us to go back to Tom Lassiter wrote this in his book, his philosophy of raising cattle, that cattle breeding is simple. The difficult part is keeping it simple. So we just got to try and simplify this thing as much as possible. Are there any last questions before we hand over to the main speaker? Yeah.
Ja, also, hold on, leave it till the end. But to wrap it up as well, the pigment and others and green populates and high heights. Why do we obviously unmarket for more meat, but something of widely select? It doesn't look like the rest of the African animals.
So you mean the rest of the other species?
Cows, they go back to looking different.
Okay, so I might crash here at the end, crash landing, but guys, part of our industry has got a huge appeal to nature and what's natural, okay? My approach to nature is you observe nature and you learn from nature, okay? But nature is not perfect, okay? 99.9% of all the species that ever existed went extinct. Okay, look it up. You can use ChatGPT or Grok or whatever you want. Okay. So it means that there is an imperfection in nature, and if that's not good enough for you, we are part of nature, and we are not perfect. Okay. So to make cattle perfectly in tune with nature again, the first mistake we made was domesticated them. If we had not domesticated cattle, then we could have said, okay, there's nature. But we also have to, we're not game farms. Well, some of you are, saw lots of game on the way, but this is not game. We've got to get these things to produce early and often and all the time, and it's a profit-driving thing. So we've got to, us as part of nature, has got to tune that ruminant into something that will breed back if it's drought, that will breed back if it's humid, that will breed back if there's insects, that will breed back if it's too cold or too hot. If you leave it to nature, they don't breed back. You know, it becomes random selection and natural selection and random mutation. So I know that's a little, I mean, people struggle with that a little bit because there's a big appeal to nature and nature's seen as perfect. But maybe there's something to think about. I'm part of nature, and goodness, I'm not perfect. And all the animals that went extinct show us that the natural process has imperfections in it, or maybe it's a perfect plan that needs imperfections to perfect it. So expecting our cattle ruminants to look like a sable or a springback or a waterbuck, when you start doing reproductive records on them out in the wild, you'll see that our balance sheet wouldn't look so good if we left it to nature to take control of it. Does that make sense? That's it. Wonderful. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you sitting through all of that.